Some of you have been sitting on your calling, waiting for somebody to co-sign on your dream, waiting for somebody to clap for you, waiting for somebody to give you permission to move. But life will not hand you a permission slip to greatness. Nobody is going to show up at your door with a certificate that says, now you're ready. If you're breathing, you're ready. If you woke up this morning, you've got a license to step into purpose. We spend too much time trying to get people to like us, trying to fit into circles, trying to gain approval. But what if I told you that the same people you're waiting on might never see the value in you? What if I told you that some of them are too busy dealing with their own insecurities to ever acknowledge your strength? If you're waiting for permission, you may wait forever. Be that guy who doesn't wait for an invitation to the table. Pull up your own chair. Be that guy who doesn't wait for somebody else to announce his name before he speaks up. Don't wait until the crowd says you're ready. If you keep waiting, you'll die with your potential still inside of you. Some of the greatest ideas never came to life because somebody was waiting on applause that never showed up. Some of the most powerful visions never left the notebook because the person holding the pen didn't think they were qualified. But if God put it inside you, then you've already got the authorization. Think about David, overlooked by his family, dismissed by his brothers, but still anointed. He didn't wait for them to approve him before he picked up that slingshot. He didn't wait for the army to say he could fight before he ran to the battlefield. He stepped in because he knew the God who gave him the stone already gave him the victory. Every time you delay your purpose waiting for permission, you allow fear to grow stronger. Every time you second-guess yourself, you empower doubt to build a throne in your mind. But be that guy who silences fear and moves anyway. You don't need a platform to start. It's just that you just need a decision. You don't need a crowd to validate you. You just need faith to move. Waiting has killed more dreams than failure ever did. You can recover from failure, but you may never recover from the regret of never trying. So be that guy who gets up and moves without waiting for someone else to say it's your turn. Be that guy who lives boldly, who acts decisively, who refuses to sit still when destiny is calling. Adversity will come, storms will come, disappointments will come. That's not a maybe, that's a guarantee. But the question is not whether you will face adversity. The question is what you will do when it shows up at your doorstep. Will you crumble under pressure or will you rise? Be that guy who stands in the middle of the storm and refuses to be moved. Everybody else may be panicking, everybody else may be running, but you stay rooted. Be that guy who says, I've been through too much to let this break me. When adversity comes, let it find you standing tall. You can't always control what hits you, but you can control how you respond. Life may knock you down, but you decide whether you stay down. Life may bruise you, but you decide whether the bruise becomes your identity or just your testimony. Adversity is not meant to define you. It's meant to refine you. Pressure produces diamonds. Fire produces gold. Storms produce strength. Be that guy who doesn't just survive adversity, but uses it to get stronger. Don't just endure the pain. Learn from it. Don't just take the hit. Grow from it. Every storm carries a lesson if you're willing to look for it. The easy thing is to complain, to cry, to feel sorry for yourself, but complaining never changed a situation. Tears alone won't shift the atmosphere. Be that guy who instead of complaining starts declaring. Be that guy who instead of crying starts climbing. Rise above it, don't drown in it. The truth is, adversity reveals character. When life squeezes you, what comes out? Is it bitterness or faith? Is it anger or resilience? Be that guy who, when squeezed, produces perseverance. Be that guy who, when pressed, releases praise. Don't think rising in adversity means you won't feel the pain. You will. But rising means you refuse to let the pain paralyze you. Rising means you keep moving, even if it's slow, even if it's messy, even if it's hard. So when life throws you into the fire, be that guy who says, turn it up if you have to, I'm still coming out. When the storm rages, be that guy who says, I may be wet, I may be tired, but I'm still standing. Confidence is not about walking into the room loud. It's about walking into the room knowing you belong there. Too many people confuse arrogance with confidence. Arrogance shouts to cover insecurity, but confidence whispers because it knows the truth. Be that guy who doesn't need to brag, doesn't need to compare, doesn't need to prove. His presence already makes a statement. When you've been through the valleys, when you've faced the nights where nobody knew your struggle, when you've cried tears that nobody saw, you earn the right to walk with confidence. Confidence is not built in comfort, it's built in challenge. Be that guy who carries himself with quiet strength because he knows what it took to get here. Think about how many opportunities are missed because somebody didn't believe in themselves. Doors were open, but fear whispered, "You're not enough." Tables had space, but insecurity said, "You don't belong." Confidence is not about being the best, it's about being authentic. Be that guy who owns his space, who doesn't shrink to make others comfortable. There's a posture to confidence. Shoulders back, head up, eyes forward, not because life is easy, but because you've decided not to bow down to fear. Be that guy who enters every situation with faith, not fear. Confidence is not saying, "I've got it all together." Confidence is saying, "Even if I don't, I know I'll figure it out." Don't let people who don't even believe in themselves convince you to doubt yourself. Be that guy who refuses to inherit other people's insecurities. Stop letting broken people define your worth. If they can't see the gold in you, that's their limitation, not your reality. The enemy of confidence is comparison. As long as you're measuring your journey against someone else's timeline, you'll always feel behind. But be that guy who knows that his path is unique. Be that guy who celebrates his own progress, even if it looks different from someone else's. When you walk in confidence, you unlock doors that fear would have kept shut. Confidence speaks before you even open your mouth. Confidence attracts opportunities, resources, and people who align with your purpose. Be that guy whose confidence creates room for his gift. So carry yourself like you know who you are. Carry yourself like you've already survived battles that should have killed you. Carry yourself like a man who understands that his very existence is proof that he has a purpose. It's easy to blend in. It's easy to do what everybody else is doing, say what everybody else is saying, chase what everybody else is chasing. But blending in will never birth greatness. Be that guy who refuses to disappear in the background. Be that guy who is bold enough to stand out. Excellence is rare. Mediocrity is crowded. Anybody can settle for good enough, but very few dare to pursue greater. Be that guy who raises his standards. Be that guy who says, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it with everything I've got. Don't blend in with the average when you were built for the extraordinary. The danger of blending in is you start losing yourself. You start mimicking other people's lives, other people's values, other people's choices. Before you know it, you're living someone else's dream while yours is dying inside you. Be that guy who refuses to trade authenticity for acceptance. Think about the people you admire most. They didn't blend in. They didn't play small to fit the crowd. They stood out because they dared to be different. Be that guy who dares to disrupt the norm. Be that guy who doesn't compromise just to make people clap for him. Standing out takes courage because when you refuse to blend in, you will be criticized. People will misunderstand you. People will question you. But be that guy who can handle rejection because he knows approval isn't his source. Ape. Proval doesn't pay your bills. Approval doesn't fuel your vision. Approval doesn't fulfill your destiny. You can't be both accepted by everybody and effective in your purpose. The higher you climb, the smaller the circle becomes. Be that guy who is willing to lose a crowd to keep his calling. Be that guy who says, I'd rather walk alone in authenticity than be surrounded in pretense. The world doesn't need another copy. It needs an original. Be that guy who knows his voice, knows his style, knows his identity, and refuses to dilute it. Stop asking, do they like me? And start asking, am I true to me? When you refuse to blend in, you give others permission to do the same. Your courage becomes contagious. Your authenticity becomes a beacon. Be that guy who sets the standard higher and inspires others to rise with you. Desire is powerful, but desire alone is not enough. Everybody wants success, everybody wants breakthrough, everybody wants the blessing, but desire without discipline is just a dream. Be that guy who doesn't just want it, but works for it. Be that guy who understands that consistency beats intensity every time. It's easy to want it when motivation is high. It's easy to chase it when energy is flowing. But what about when you're tired? What about when the results don't show up quickly? What about when nobody claps for you? That's where discipline separates the dreamers from the doers. Be that guy who keeps showing up even when he doesn't feel like it. Desire gets you started, but discipline keeps you going. Be that guy who trains his body, his mind, and his spirit to obey purpose, not feelings. Feelings are fickle. Feelings change. If you live by feelings, you'll quit halfway through. Be that guy who lives by commitment. Discipline means you wake up early when the bed is calling. Discipline means you save money when spending feels easier. Discipline means you study when others are partying. Discipline means you pray when others are distracted. Be that guy who pays the price now so he can live in freedom later. The reason most people never see the fullness of their potential is because they mistake desire for discipline. They talk about what they want, they fantasize about where they want to be, but they never build the habits to sustain it. Be that guy who doesn't just talk, he acts. Discipline is not glamorous. Nobody posts discipline on social media. Nobody celebrates the early mornings, the sacrifices, the lonely nights. But discipline builds the life that desire only dreams about. Be that guy who embraces the grind in silence so he can live the reward in peace. Every great man you admire is not just fueled by desire, but anchored in discipline. Desire made them dream, but discipline made it real. Be that guy who chooses habits over hype, who chooses structure over shortcuts, who chooses longevity over likes. Be that guy who understands that discipline is freedom. Discipline frees you from regret, frees you from wasted time, frees you from a life of mediocrity. Desire will give you visions, but discipline will hand you victories. Talent may open the door, but integrity keeps you in the room. You can sing, you can lead, you can work, you can hustle, but without integrity, you won't last. Be that guy who doesn't sell out for a quick check. Be that guy who refuses to cut corners to get ahead. Integrity will carry you when talent runs dry. Everybody loves to be celebrated for their gift, but character is what speaks when nobody is watching. Who are you when the lights are off, when the stage is empty, when the crowd goes home? Be that guy who is the same in private as he is in public. Integrity means your soul is not for sale. Opportunities will come that test your integrity. Easy money, quick fame, temporary comfort. But be that guy who says no. Be that guy who chooses to lose the opportunity rather than lose himself. Because once integrity is gone, everything else crumbles with it. Don't underestimate the power of a clean conscience. There is a peace that money cannot buy and a freedom that shortcuts cannot give. Be that guy who can lay his head down at night knowing he compromised nothing, knowing he stood for something, knowing he stayed true. The world celebrates success, but heaven celebrates integrity. People might not clap for you when you do the right thing, but your spirit will. Be that guy who values long-term legacy over short-term applause. Integrity may not get you likes, but it will get you peace. Integrity is protection. It protects your name, your family, your destiny. Scandals destroy people because they neglected integrity when nobody was watching. Be that guy who builds a shield of truth around his life so no lie can destroy him. Integrity is not perfection. You will stumble, you will fall, you will make mistakes. But integrity means you own it, you apologize, you correct it. Integrity doesn't mean never falling. It means never faking. Be that guy who takes responsibility for his wrongs and makes them right. Be that guy whose yes means yes and whose no means no. Be that guy whose word is strong enough to build trust. Protect your integrity. It will keep you standing when the storms of life test your foundation. The world is crowded with followers. Everybody is waiting for somebody else to take the first step. But be that guy who steps up when others step back. Be that guy who takes initiative when everybody else hesitates. Leadership is not about position, it's about responsibility. Leadership means you don't wait for someone else to fix the problem. You stand up and fix it yourself. Be that guy who sees chaos and brings order. Be that guy who sees confusion and brings clarity. Don't wait for the title. Lead from where you are. Some people think leaders are born, but leaders are made in the moment. Leaders are formed when challenges arise and somebody decides to answer the call. Be that guy who answers. Be that guy who says, if no one else will do it, I will. Leadership is sacrifice. It means you will often give more than you get. You will carry more than you receive. You will pour out when you're empty. But be that guy who leads anyway, because real leadership is not about comfort, it's about calling. Don't think leadership means you won't feel fear. Leaders feel it too. The difference is leaders move despite the fear. Be that guy who acts even when his knees are shaking, who speaks even when his voice trembles, who leads even when the outcome isn't clear. Leadership is not domination, it's inspiration. It's not control, it's influence. Be that guy who doesn't push people down but pulls people up. Be that guy who sees the potential in others and awakens it. Real leadership multiplies leaders, not followers. When you lead, people will criticize. When you lead, people will misunderstand you. But be that guy who leads anyway, because you're not called to be popular, you're called to be effective. Don't chase approval, chase impact. Be that guy who steps into leadership with courage, with vision, with integrity. When the room is silent, be the one to speak. When the team is stuck, be the one to move. When life demands a leader, be that guy who answers. True greatness is not measured by how high you climb, but by how many you lift on your way up. Be that guy who doesn't just succeed alone, but takes others with him. Be that guy who celebrates another man's win as if it were his own. Jealousy is easy, envy is natural, but it takes strength to build others when you're still building yourself. Be that guy who has the maturity to cheer for others without resentment. Be that guy who understands that someone else's blessing doesn't block his own. The world teaches competition, but real success is about contribution. Be that guy who adds value to others. Be the one who shares knowledge, who mentors, who supports. Don't hoard wisdom. Don't hoard opportunity. Multiply it. Building others doesn't weaken you, it strengthens you. Every seed you sow into someone else comes back multiplied. Be that guy who invests in people, because people are the greatest legacy you can leave behind. Think about how it feels when someone believes in you. Think about how it feels when someone supports you. Be that guy who creates that same feeling for someone else. Be that guy who says, I see you, I believe in you, I've got your back. You never know how far one word of encouragement can go. One compliment, one piece of advice, one act of support can shift the trajectory of a person's life. Be that guy who uses his voice to plant life into others. Don't be intimidated by someone else's potential. They fuel it. Don't be threatened by someone else's success. Celebrate it. Be that guy who understands that helping others rise never dims your own light. Be that guy who builds people, not just projects. Be that guy who strengthens communities, not just reputations. Build others up, because in the end, your greatest impact will be measured in the lives you touched. Success is dangerous if you're not careful. Success can make you forget the nights you cried, the seasons you struggled, the times you almost gave up. Be that guy who remembers. Be that guy who stays humble even when the blessings flow. Pride destroys what perseverance built. You can work for years, sacrifice for years, and one moment of arrogance can undo it all. Be that guy who doesn't let success get to his head. Humility will protect what success gives you. Humility doesn't mean denying your success. It means acknowledging the source. Be that guy who remembers who carried him when he couldn't carry himself. Be that guy who knows that talent opened doors, but grace kept them open. Stay humble enough to keep learning. Success can trick you into thinking you know it all. But be that guy who stays teachable. Be that guy who knows there's always more to learn, always more to grow. Humility keeps you connected to people. Pride isolates. Pride makes you unapproachable, untouchable, unreachable. Be that guy who stays grounded, who stays connected, who treats the janitor with the same respect as the CEO. The higher you go, the easier it is to forget the ground you came from. But be that guy who remembers his roots. Don't despise humble beginnings. Don't erase your past. Let it remind you of how far you've come. When success comes, people will test you, they will flatter you, they will praise you, they will put you on pedestals. Don't let it intoxicate you. Be that TT guy who can receive honor without losing humility. Stay humble in success because humility makes room for more. Be that guy who says, I'm grateful, I'm growing, and I'm grounded. Everybody wants the prize, but not everybody wants the process. Be that guy who embraces the grind. Be that guy who is willing to sweat, sacrifice, and struggle to reach destiny. Hard work is not punishment, it's preparation. Shortcuts look tempting, but they steal longevity. Be that guy who doesn't look for the easy way, but chooses the right way. The path of hard work may be longer, but it's also stronger. It builds a foundation that cannot be shaken. Hard work separates the dreamers from the doers. Dreaming feels good, talking feels good, planning feels good, but only work produces results. Be that guy who doesn't just dream it, but does it. You can't pray for what you're not willing to work for. You can't ask for harvest if you refuse to sow. Be that guy who combines faith with effort, who understands that faith without works is dead. Hard work teaches discipline. It teaches resilience. It teaches patience. Be that guy who doesn't run from the lesson because it's hard. The grind is shaping you into who you need to be to handle the blessing. Others may laugh at your hustle now, but they'll ask for your secrets later. Be that guy who works in silence, who builds in private, who lets results speak louder than words. There's no shame in sweat. There's no shame in labor. Be that guy who wears his work ethic like a crown. Hard work is not your enemy, it's your ally. Embrace it, love it, honor it, because what you work for will always mean more than what you're handed. Be that guy who works until his reality looks like his vision. Life will test you. Circumstances will shake you. People will disappoint you. But be that guy who holds on to faith no matter what. Faith is the anchor when everything else is moving. Faith doesn't mean you won't feel fear. It means fear won't stop you. Be that guy who believes even when the evidence says otherwise. Be that guy who trusts the unseen when the scene is falling apart. Faith is not a feeling, it's a decision. Feelings come and go, but faith is a choice you make daily. Be that guy who wakes up every morning and chooses to believe again. Your faith will be attacked, doubt will whisper, failure will mock, delay will discourage. But be that guy who stands anyway. Be that guy who says, even if I don't see it yet, I still believe it's coming. Faith will make you look crazy. People will laugh at you for believing what you can't prove. But be that guy who doesn't need validation to believe. Faith doesn't wait for evidence. It creates it. When storms hit, faith keeps you steady. When doors close, faith keeps you knocking. When dreams delay, faith keeps you moving. Be that guy whose faith refuses to quit. Faith doesn't eliminate the fire, it carries you through it. Faith doesn't erase the valley, it guides you through it. Be that guy whose faith stands tall when everything else is falling. Keep your faith strong because it will carry you where strength cannot, sustain you where resources cannot, and open doors where effort cannot. Be that guy whose faith outlives every trial. Words are not just sounds, they are seeds. Every word you speak plants something in the soil of your life. Be that guy who plants life, not death. Be that guy who speaks hope, not fear. Stop cursing your future with your own mouth. Stop saying, I can't, I'll never, it's over. Your words are framing your tomorrow. Be that guy who speaks as if it's already done, who declares victory before the battle ends. Be careful what you say in the storm. Pain makes us speak recklessly, but words don't disappear. They build. Be that guy who guards his tongue, who speaks faith even through tears. Speak life into yourself. Speak life into your family. Speak life into your work. Be that guy who uses his words to create, not destroy. Don't just think positive. Speak positive. The power of life and death is in your tongue. That means every conversation is a choice. Every sentence is a seed. Be that guy who chooses words that align with destiny, not defeat. Your words can lift a person out of depression. Your words can heal a broken spirit. Be that guy who uses his voice as medicine, not poison. Speak what builds, not what breaks. Even when you don't see it yet, speak it. Speak as if it already exists. Speak like your words are pulling your future closer. Be that guy whose declarations shape his reality. Be that guy who speaks life, not just for himself, but for everyone connected to him. Speak it until you see it. Declare it until it manifests. Proclaim it until it lives. Responsibility is not weakness. It's power. Be that guy who owns his actions, his choices, his mistakes. Stop pointing fingers. Stop blaming others. Stop making excuses. Responsibility gives you control. Blame is easy. Excuses are easy, but they keep you stuck. Be that guy who says, I made this mess, but I'll clean it up. I caused this problem, but I'll fix it. Responsibility is maturity. Be that guy who learns from failure instead of hiding from it. Mistakes are not the enemy. Refusing to take responsibility is. Growth comes when you own it. Don't wait for others to change before you move. Don't wait for others to apologize before you heal. Be that guy who takes responsibility for his own growth, his own healing, his own destiny. Responsibility doesn't mean everything is your fault. It means everything is your choice. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond. That's power. People respect responsibility. People follow responsibility. Be that guy who earns respect not by talking big, but by taking ownership. Taking responsibility means you don't run when it gets hard. You face it. You fix it. You grow from it. Be that guy who turns responsibility into strength. Be that guy who doesn't run from accountability but embraces it. Responsibility is the bridge between who you are and who you're meant to be. Change is uncomfortable. Change is unfamiliar. But change is necessary. Be that guy who doesn't cling to the past when the future is calling. Be that guy who embraces transition. Seasons will shift whether you're ready or not. People will leave whether you agree or not. Doors will close whether you want them to or not. Be that guy who adapts, who adjusts, who keeps moving forward. Fear of change keeps people stuck in dead places, dead jobs, dead relationships. Be that guy who refuses to stay in a graveyard when life is ahead. Change strips comfort but births growth. Be that guy who chooses growth over comfort. Be that guy who says, I'll let go of what's familiar so I can reach what's better. It hurts to change. It feels lonely to change. But change is proof you're alive. Only dead things never change. Be that guy who keeps evolving, who keeps shifting, who keeps becoming. Don't let nostalgia trick you into staying stuck. The past may have been good, but the future can be greater. Be that guy who doesn't idolize what was, but invests in what can be. Fear of change will make you miss opportunities. Fear of change will make you settle. Be that guy who moves anyway, even when it's scary. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's movement in spite of it. Be that guy who embraces change as a doorway, not a death sentence. Change doesn't kill you, it grows you. Quitting is the easiest option. Walking away feels tempting when the fight drags on. But be that guy who refuses to give up. Be that guy who says, I may bend, but I won't break. Failure doesn't destroy you. Quitting does. Setbacks don't end you. Giving up does. Be that guy who takes the hit, feels the pain, but keeps moving anyway. The road to destiny is paved with obstacles. There will be rejection. There will be betrayal. There will be disappointment. But be that guy who refuses to stop walking. Every winner you admire has scars from moments when quitting seemed easier, but they didn't. Be that guy who has scars that tell a story of resilience, not regret. Quitting may bring temporary relief, but it brings permanent regret. Be that guy who chooses long-term reward over short-term comfort. The moment you want to quit is usually the moment breakthrough is near. Be that guy who holds on one more day, who pushes one more time, who refuses to stop right before the blessing. Refusing to quit doesn't mean it won't be hard. It means you won't let hard stop you. Be that guy who keeps going with tears in his eyes, with pain in his body, with doubts in his mind. Be that guy who finishes what he started. Refuse to quit because perseverance always pays. Distractions are everywhere. Social media, gossip, comfort, comparison, they all fight for your attention. But be that guy who keeps his eyes on the vision. Distractions are loud, but vision is steady. Be that guy who doesn't waste time chasing meaningless things. Be that guy who says no to good so he can say yes to great. The enemy doesn't need to destroy you if he can distract you. Be that guy who refuses to let distractions steal his destiny. Keep your eyes forward. Vision gives you discipline. Vision gives you direct. Be that guy who filters every decision through the lens of vision. If it doesn't serve the vision, let it go. Distraction feels good in the moment, but costs you in the future. Vision may hurt in the moment, but it pays in the future. Be that guy who chooses long-term vision over short-term satisfaction. Be careful who you let around you. Some people are distractions in disguise. Be that guy who surrounds himself with people who push vision, not pull it down. Vision requires focus. Focus requires sacrifice. Be that guy who is willing to sacrifice now for where he's going later. Be that guy who stays locked in, who stays focused, who refuses to let distraction delay his destiny. Likes fade, follows fade, popularity fades, but legacy remains. Be that guy who doesn't live for applause, but for impact. Be that guy who asks, what will I leave behind when I'm gone? Not how many liked my post today. Legacy is about lives changed, not screens tapped. Popularity can be bought, but legacy must be built. Be that guy who builds something that outlives him. Be that guy who lives with purpose, not just for attention. Attention is temporary, purpose is eternal. Your children won't inherit your likes, but they will inherit your legacy. Be that guy who leaves a foundation for the next generation to stand on. Be that guy who doesn't chase fame, but builds faith, who doesn't crave followers, but creates leaders. Legacy is not about being remembered. It's about making sure others can continue the work. Be that guy who plants trees he may never sit under. Be that guy who lives for legacy, not likes. Because when the noise fades, impact is the only sound that echoes.